Alright, this is the first in a series of videos I'm doing on building the furniture for Montessori. I did another video, which is an introduction, and basically just talked about choosing a wood, getting it cut, some important information on that. Well, not information, but some important things to keep in mind when getting your wood cut. So at this point, I've already got the wood cut. At least I've got it cut to the rough size. And I've pre-finished the wood, because I'm building so many of these at once that it takes a long time to finish them once they're assembled. So what I like to do is I like to pre-finish everything first. And well, as you can see, I've got this is just one stack of them. When I find something that's wrong with the wood as I'm cutting it, I'll mark it with that blue tape so that I can take that in consideration. Just because an edge, for example, might be bad doesn't mean that the whole board is bad. Although when you're cutting this wood up, if you were to cut the edge off of this because it was chipped or whatever, then you've eliminated the possible use of both of these pieces of wood to be the same size, obviously, because you've cut, even if you've only cut a ½ inch off of here. So you have to plan your cuts before you actually start them. The other thing is I'm using plywood, and as you know, plywood, you can see the edges. So I'm going to be banding all of this plywood. And what I'm using is pine strips. Maple, although it's a stronger wood, it just is the wrong color. Now your other option, of course, is you can buy the veneer edging, iron-on, and I don't like it particularly, but if you're only doing a couple shelves, then it might be the way to go. But if you're doing any quantity, then you want to, I would say, make your own edges. And these are all 1/16 inch strips out of just plain pine. Although you do have to get clear pine because you don't want to see knot holes and things along the edge of the wood. So anyhow, today I'm going to be cutting the wood down the center, and I'm going to be making them each board a little less than 12 inches wide. I'll then do the edge banding. Once I have the edge banding, I'll then start cutting the boards to the size needed for the shelves, and finally start assembling them. So without further ado, let me get measuring, measure twice, cut once, whatever, and get started. Okay, once the sheets of plywood are cut up, that's some of them, there's more, you then have to get the strips ready to do the edges. And as you can see, there's quite a few of them. Now these were already pre-polyurethaned. Right? I lay them down in one strip across the table and give it 3 coats. Then when they're done, I just separate them. It's a good idea to put a piece of wax paper underneath because they do have a tendency to stick to the table. And now if you notice, these have marks on the back. That's because each one gets inspected, and the best side is the one that I choose. To sand them, I put them all together, about 5 at a time, and just take the sander and run it over. Once those 5 are done, I'll grab another 5 and so on until I have the whole pile. Then I'll take them, these have been sanded, I'll take these, I'll lay them out the table, and the table is about 36 inches wide. I'll just have one row of 36 inches of strips, and here you can see where this one stuck to the table. That's why it's good to have wax paper under it. Anyhow, I'll give it the 3 coats, and then everything is ready to assemble. This part takes the longest because each strip of plywood has to have an edge put against it, and it just takes a long time. You can do about 15 an hour, so you got a lot of hours worth of work if you're making them in quantity. So anyhow, enough talking. Let me get back to my sanding and then some more polyurethaning. Okay, now it's time to band the edges with all that thin wood that I cut. The tops require banding on all four sides. The reason is you're going to be looking at them, and the shelves, you won't see the ends of them, so you don't have to put a strip of wood on the end. But right now, this one has its first strip on. If you can see that, well, you shouldn't see it because it's there to cover up the plywood edge. And so you put the ends on first because you don't want to be looking head on and see the edge. So you do the edges or the sides first, then you do the front and back at the same time. So I've got two operations going. This operation on the bottom, I'm putting the end pieces on. This operation over here, I'm putting the side pieces on after the ends have already been on. Right? This is another one that the end has been put on. So one other thing is when you're using clamps, you want to make sure that you have it supported the whole length. Otherwise, you'll have gaps and it won't stick, obviously. So have enough clamps. As Norm says, you can never have enough clamps. The other thing is I put a piece of tape on the piece of wood that I'm using between the clamps and the edge, and that's so that nothing will stick to it. Okay? Now, the other thing is you can put it on with your finger, but I like a little brush. This is one that I got a 3-pack at the dollar store, and I just cut it in half so it's not as long. It's nice and stiff. It's 3/4 inches. Makes a nice way to do the edges. So these here are done. Now you notice that they're sticking out. All right, that's purposely. The reason is that it's easier to cut them off, and I use the scroll saw for that, but you can use whatever, or you can just make them the exact length. But I like to make them a little longer. That makes sure that they're covered on both ends. And then after I cut them off with a scroll saw, if they are sticking out just a little, I'll just touch them off with a sander, and that takes care of it. So these, once these dry completely, I'll trim them down, and then I'll take them over here, and I'll put the edges on them. And then the last step, well, it's the same step on both, and I'll show you that when I'm ready to do one. But you have to run them through the router to make things smooth. Because again, if you notice, these are sticking up a little. Okay. So that doesn't matter because I'm going to be trimming that down, and I'll show you that when I get to it. Okay, after I've applied the edge at the end, the next step is to trim it off, and I use the scroll saw. And just like that. Okay, now after that, I come and I'll put the edge on, and then I'll trim it all down. Okay, the edges of the tops are now done. Not the front edges, but the back edges. And you can see how high that is. Right? Now, again, that was done purposely, so I don't have to try to even everything up as I go along. Right? This one is a little low here, a little high here. So it allows you to do it fairly quickly. So what I do next is I run it through the router with a very small rounding bit on it. And I only use a very little bit of the rounding bit itself. So let's put this in here. Okay, so if you look, you'll see how much of that rounding bit actually, how much of the rounding bit's going to hit, which isn't much at all. It just barely hits it. And I don't want to really go into the plywood very much. I really want to round over the 1/16th of an inch of the banding that I put on. Now we'll get a little of the router. The router will get a little bit of the plywood, but not much. So let me show you how it's done. Put this on the head. Okay. Okay, and there you go. All right. Round it over, nice and flush with the wood, and that's it. Now, everything is pre-finished, and it has 3 coats on it. However, I will have to go back and touch things up. Not that you can really see it, but once everything is done, there'll be a couple of issues I'll have to touch up. Now down here, you can see here's the end piece, and here's the sides. Now these aren't done yet, so I'll do those next. Again, you do the edge first, and that's so when you're looking at it, you're not going to be looking directly at the cut edge of the little banding strip that goes on. So let me finish these up and move on to something else. Okay, it's organized chaos. It's been days getting to this point, but soon I should be able to start. This is only part of the wood. It's elsewhere. But anyhow, it's actually, the building's going to be the easy part. It's getting ready, getting the prepping, and once that's done, then it's actually time for assembly. So we'll be getting to that within another day, I hope. Okay, it's been about a week or so. It's time to start drilling and starting to get this stuff assembled. Well, it's actually not going to be assembled here. It's going to be assembled on the job site. But before I start with a pocket jig, which I want to show you, I have to make a decision on whether this front, this is going to be the bottom panel, whether the front is flush or whether it's inset. Right? Because that makes a difference on where I put the holes on the bottom to attach it. So I've got to get that decision today, but I'm going to start drilling. So let me show you. This is a pocket hole jig. It's essential. You really can't do this job if you don't have a pocket hole jig. You don't have to have one like this. You can have the portable one. It doesn't really matter. This just makes it easier. So what you do, this is a side panel. The side panels are going to have 2 holes in it to attach the top, and each of the shelves will have another 2 holes on each end, and that will be attached to the side panel. So the first thing you do is you put your panel in, you tighten it up. All right, this is a special jig that comes with a pocket, or a special drill I should say, that comes with a pocket hole jig. All right, so I'm just going to use this hole here. That's one. Each side panel requires 2 holes. That's it. That's 1 hole. That's 2 holes. All right. Now, to go into these holes, it's a special screw. This is 1.25 inches long. There's a square head, and he uses a special screwdriver. Again, it comes with a kit, or you can buy them separately. That simply goes in there. This will be what attaches the top to it. All right, so let me take this over and show you how I assemble it. Now you're going to want to have something, obviously, that you're not going to scratch your work surface up after you spend all the time varnishing it. So you lay it out. Again, this is the top, this is the bad side, this is the good side. Be sure you don't drill the wrong side. Lay it out like that. You lay the other one out like this. Now I'm going to shut the camera off for a second so that I can get this wood set up. It's easier, of course, if you have 2 people doing this. As I said, there isn't enough room to assemble all of these here. Plus, we take a moving van to move them. So this is just going to be a sample put together, and so I can get the spacing for the shelves and so on and so forth. But let me just sort of hold it to make it a little easier to put it together. I have it clamped together now. The bottom is flush, and I've got the shelves in. I don't know where the shelves are going to be. This one's backwards. It's supposed to be flipped around. It's just in there for a spacer. I don't know where the shelves are going to be. What I'm going to do, though, is determine where the shelves should be, and then I will be cutting a piece of wood that I can just set in there and bring the shelves down, and that way nothing has to be measured. Also, I've got some scrap wood on the side because I don't want to be putting the clamp marks on there when I tighten it up. So let me put this bottom shelf in and show you how quick it is. I've already put the screws in the hole. Now I don't know if you can see this or not. Let's see if you can see it. That one's done. That one's done. This is easier if you're working off of a table, but right now my table is completely filled with shelving units, so I can't. Okay, bottom shelf's in, and that, my friends, is how easy it is. Do the same thing with these. Putting this thing together, once I have a piece of wood cut so that I know where the shelf should be, putting this thing together shouldn't take any more than 10-15 minutes. Now the other thing I do is I'm going to clamp in this direction to hold the top down. Okay. But again, piece of wood to protect it, and I'll have to take this off in order to get it down far enough. But it's the same process. You just make sure that everything is square, and it helps. Again, if you bring this up, that'll make sure that it's completely square across. So all you do is line up your edges and screw it in. The screw in. Let's see, I don't know if I can really do this without a clamp on it, but I'll give it a try. Oh, the other thing, put your top on before you have your second shelf in, because let's say the second shelf goes here, you can't get the drill in. All right? So you want to make sure that you have enough room to put your top, to get your drill in. So that's a reason you don't put the second shelf in. But I'm going to get the clamps and do this right. I'll show you what it looks like as soon as I get a couple more in. What I've done is I've got a couple boards so that I can just slide them in, not have to measure between the shelves. I rounded off the edges of them so it's not sharp, and put the shelves in, put the board in, push it flat, and that's it. Go to the next one. Make sure that it's tight against the bottom. That's that one. And again, push it over so it's tight. Tight. And one more. Okay, I'll pull that out. Pull this one out. Bring the next shelf down. Move the clamps over, and repeat the process. Now, also, these boards are thin, and if they're real thick, they're going to interfere with this, but, I mean, even a 3/4 inch board would be okay. Get the screw in. That's one. Sure. 2. Now again, you can see why you can't put this shelf in to get the top on, because I wouldn't be able to put that top on with this shelf in. Okay. Now you saw how long it took to put those 2 shelves in. 4 shelves really isn't much difference. So, take the clamp off, take my little dividers off and keep these someplace because I'm going to be using an awful lot. And this is just a spacer that I put in. So, here it is. I still have to put the bottom piece in, and again, I don't know whether I'm going to have this flush. Flush or inset. Now, I'll figure that out. There you go. And again, once you're putting them together, if you're working off of a table, it's going to be easier than if you're trying to work off the ground. And once you have a system set up, then everything will go nice and smooth. So that's it. Went from a couple sheets of plywood to finished cabinets. And like I said, I got quite a few more to do. So get started on that now. I hope this helps somebody if you're planning on doing it. Oh, by the way, the next one's going to be on tables, and there's some of the wood started for the tables. I don't have the legs or anything made, but I'll be doing that in the next video.